They feared his power, and they plotted to kill him. And so as Jesus' followers are growing and growing, and he expands his ministry, he travels to different places so that they would know the good news. So that they would know the heart of God the Father. So that they would know his love and his care for them and his compassion. He chastised those leaders. He chastised them. And so finally, they came and they pursued him, seeking to kill him. They pursued him in the middle of the night, partly through one of Jesus's followers. He betrayed him. But Jesus knew everything that was supposed to take place. He knew all of it. He knew all of it. And the night that he was betrayed, he cried out to God. He said, God, if there is any other way, let this cup pass from my lips. But if not, let your will be done. And God knew that for his people, for all of the people of the earth to be redeemed from their sin, God knew that his only begotten Son would have to die in that way, to suffer in that way. And Jesus sweat blood because he was so afraid. He knew the sufferings that he would go through. He knew the pain that he would go through. And so he was pursued in the middle of the night. They took him, they arrested him. They judged him. And they wrongly convicted him. And his sentence was death through crucifixion. But first he was scourged. He wasn't just crucified like other sinners. He went through worse beatings. They tied him to a post and they whipped him. They scourged him. They ripped open his flesh. As they whipped him, they ripped open his back. They ripped open his front side, his legs, his arms. He was beaten completely. And they did not relent in their punishment. They were not merciful to him. But they beat him. And they beat him and they beat him. And just when people thought that he couldn't take any more, that was enough, they continued to beat him. And Jesus bore all of it in complete humility and docility to the Father, because God had prepared him for that. And God was faithful in that. And sometimes God doesn't take us out of our suffering, but he gives us the grace to endure in docility, in humility, in obedience. And so they scourged him and they brought him back. And Pilate, the one who judged him, he thought that this would satisfy the people. Just a scourging would be enough. But the people wanted him dead. The people wanted him dead. And they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." And the one who judged him, Pilate, he feared the crowd. He feared rebellion. He feared what might happen to him. And so he let the people have their way. And he said, okay, crucify him. And it didn't take long. Jesus carried his cross He carried his heavy cross, his wooden cross that was much larger than him, that was made of pure wood. He carried it on his beaten back. And he fell. He fell 3 times. But every time, God gave him the strength to get back up. I don't know how he did it. There's a movie called The Passion, and you can even look this up on YouTube if you want. And I'll post a link to that too. But his back that was beaten, his whole body that was beaten and whipped and wounded, he lugged his heavy cross on that body. And finally he made it all the way up to the hill where he was destined to die. And he sat next to 2 other sinners. He was crucified next to 2 other sinners. They laid him down on his cross, and they drove the nails into his hands and into his feet. And he became crucified to his cross, and they hung him up. And the 2 other people, the 2 other sinners that were beside him, they had done wrong. They deserved to die. They were worthy of that punishment. And one of them made fun of Jesus. He mocked him. But the other one said, "We are worthy of our punishment." He said to the other sinner, "We are worthy of this, but he is not worthy. He is not worthy to die like this. This is the holy man." And this sinner said to him, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said, "Behold, on this day, you will be with me in heaven." And right then and there, he received salvation. And so at 3 p.m., 3 hours later, Jesus looked up to heaven and he said, Father, why have you abandoned me?" And he felt abandoned by God. He felt abandoned by his Father. And so just after that, Jesus breathed his last breath and he died. He died on the cross. But to make sure that he was truly dead, someone took a spear and they drove it into his side, into his chest, and blood and water gushed forth. And a while later, after they realized that he was dead, they took him down and they buried him, and he remained in the tomb. And during this time, many of his disciples, his apostles, they were scattered. They feared what would happen to them. They feared similar punishment. They were scattered, afraid. Their leader had just been crucified and killed in the harshest of ways. But that wasn't the end. He didn't just die. In history, records prove this to be true.